I especially like how he told Jeff Poor or Josh Moon just a couple days ago that this was completely off base. That this was a woman who was a borderline stalker, and he and his wife had decided to block her on social media, and that none of that ever happened. But boom, now we've got the text messages, we've got her recorded voice talking to him, and it's pretty wild. I want to take this opportunity to do something that I never get to do, and that is I'm going to read the contents of that text message, but I'm going to do it in the voice of Sir Richard Attenborough. So, so apparently this text message came from Miss McPherson, and she says to him, I can't wait for you to tie me up to the bed and make me beg for your I want to tie you up and swallow your that hard and you up that would you like that? His reply, of course, you will be rewarded for your patience. I can't talk anymore. I will talk soon. Absolutely brilliant. Brilliant.
Can't make this up.
I mean, it was almost as beautiful as you describing a lion taking down a gazelle, Mr. Rushing. I tip my hat to you.
So few opportunities to do that.
No representation is made that the quality of legal services to be provided are greater than the legal services of other lawyers. You found the Heart of Dixie podcast. My name is Harry Still. I am a retired gentleman down in Daphne, Alabama. I'm joined today by my co-host, Brandon Mosley, reporter and content manager at the Alabama Gazette. How are you today, Brandon?
I'm doing fine, Harry. How are you?
I'm great. And we have a special guest, Gilmer Frank Isbell, former House Rep from District 28, which is Gadsden, Alabama. How are you today, Gil?
Doing well, and you just call me Gil.
That's what I've already taken the liberty. So
Okay.
Does this is that an accurate map? You're basically from Steele to downtown Gadsden. I guess it takes in Attala. Who's
that? That's correct.
Who did you?
Presently, it's Mac. Presently, it's Mac Butler in the redistricting. I ran for a second term and lost by a couple hundred votes, 220 votes, I think. And it is what it is. But there were actually a lot of problems.
Are you the guy that flipped it? Wasn't this Craig Ford? Well, this is a Democrat district, right? And
it originally was. Well, it originally was where Craig was, and he ran for Senate in 2018, and that's where I ran for his seat in the House in 2018. And it pretty much went along the lines. It was like 56 to 44 or 54 to 46, right in there, and it went along party lines. But since then, the redistricting makes this a majority Republican district because it has Rainbow City in it. It has always had Attala, Gadsden, but it took away some things going up to Mountain Borough.
Right.
And just it was a reshift of everything.
Well, it looks like, South Side and all that is out in Glencoe. So
it used to be I had a larger part of Glencoe up on the mountain and did not have much or any of Rainbow City. And then that all changed.
So the U.S. Steel plant, the old steel plant was in your district, wasn't it?
It's still in the present district, yes.
And also some things that we've covered before, the coal ash, the first coal ash pile that got covered up is right there on the river, and it's been touted by the power company as a great success in cap in place.
Well, that's a whole nother subject because it's hard to, it was in the old district and it's in the new district as well.
So, Craig Ford is now the mayor, and he's one of these.
That's correct.
He's one of these Democrats, kind of like the Walt Maddox over in Tuscaloosa. Not what I would categorize as your typical Democrat. Would you say so, Brandon?
No, I mean, Craig is more what we thought of as Democrats in the 80s and 90s. These new woke Democrats that are for 72 genders and freeing Palestine. Yeah, that's a different group of people.
Well, so Gil, this here says that you were on the Commerce and Small Business, Economic Development, Tourism, Transportation, Utilities, and Infrastructure subcommittees. So, one of the things that I see as a real opportunity for some of these, I don't think people understand coming from a place like Gadsden, nobody gave a damn about going to, well, I guess some of them did, but you wanted to get on at the steel mill and you could make the equivalent of 6 figures today, and you start working there when you're 17 years old and you retire with a great pension when you're 60 or whatever, and you go fishing the rest of your life. And that's what, and between that and Goodyear, and you had just some real good, even union jobs. The county employees, when I was your chief executive officer, all belonged to the damn steelworkers union of all things.
Well, you're exactly right. The steel plant, Goodyear opened, I think, in 1929, the steel plant sometime thereafter in the 30s, and they were both mainstays. We were a blue collar county for decades upon decades.
Yeah, but that's not a bad thing. People made a
hell
of a lot of money at that steel plant and at Goodyear.
Well, the growth of Etowah County was actually stifled, in my opinion, because of that, because they didn't want other companies coming in competing for their workers, but they drew workers from all the surrounding counties.
Oh, yeah.
And, at one time, I think Goodyear had 3,500 employees, if not more. The steel plant had a lot, but what happened at the steel plant in the end, it closed in 1999. You had some people that bought the company and they raided the pension, and it really hurt a lot of people. And I don't care if union, non-union, whatever, it was the wrong thing to do.
I guess what I'm getting at is I see a real opportunity for what I call like Rust Belt towns like Gadsden. So look, what do we need? We need power. You have an excess of power. I mean, all the electricity that was going to that steel mill 25 years ago.
Well, the steam plant for Alabama Power that produced a lot of the power for Goodyear, that has actually been closed down now.
Yeah, so
that's what created the ash pond.
So there was a dude, and I can't remember his name, but he rolled into town and he bought the old steam plant down there, and he made a residence out of it. And he had
that was actually the pump house.
Pump house, that's what it was. Yeah.
And this guy, he actually worked for Mr. Casey. Mr. Casey from Pittsburgh bought the steel plant 2003 to 2004, right in that time period. And he had grown up at the steel mills, but he had figured out how to buy old equipment and sell it overseas.
Yeah, I think
my limited knowledge.
He pulled the boilers out or the furnaces out, and I remember them putting them on barges and sending them to China.
That's exactly what happened. But there's a great deal of scrap of copper and other types of metals that have high value that were all over that steel plant that most people didn't realize it was there. I mean, you had 5 to 6 inch lines, like this size, that they ended up pulling out from underground in these tunnels. These tunnels were all over the facility. And he made a lot of money, and there is a rumor, and I don't know for a fact, but there's something big happening this Friday at the steel plant, an announcement. There are different companies that have gone out there, probably about 6 different companies that are on the property, but it's a large piece of property, and a portion of it is very contaminated because of what they did in the steel industry back decades ago. But it's got a lot of potential, and we hope that things will be happening.
I'm the guy that filed the petition to have it declared a Brownsville site. So,
I wish that had gone through, but apparently, it's so far down the line. There are other places that are worse, and it would cost a tremendous amount of money to get it truly cleaned up.
Well, let's get into the heart of the matter here. Brandon, is this your article?
No, that one is not mine.
That's not yours.
But for the viewers that don't understand the background, John Wahl was the chairman of the Alabama Republican Party. He'd been chairman for years. And then abruptly, he resigned his chairmanship and then filed paperwork on the last day to run for Alabama lieutenant governor. Gil here challenged Wahl's residency. Gil, what have you got on you? Explain that to what your thinking was to the viewers.
Well, there are rules in place in the ALGOP in the bylaws. However, the challenge was based on the state. The higher level officials have to live in a state for 7 years prior to running for office. And depending on what John did, and since the challenge was not accepted, and I forgot which year, I think it was in 2020, he registered to get a Tennessee driver's license, of which he obtained. And then he also registered to vote in Tennessee. However, he never voted in Tennessee. But if you're going to move to a state, you have to have a residence or some type of documentation that you're going to be providing the state saying, all right, I'm living here and I want my license. Well, apparently sometime very immediately thereafter, John was the vice chair of the GOP in the state of Alabama, and then he ran and became the chair. So all of that went away, whether he moved or not, whether, those things were never brought out. They've challenged it. I've talked to both he and his attorney. And like I said, I like John, but again, are the laws in place to follow? Or are they also there to skirt around? Because he was actually pulled over for a traffic stop. I think it was in 2023, and he used his Tennessee driver's license. And that's what brought a lot of this to the surface way back then.
Was that in Madison?
I would have to go back and look. I'm not going to say I know for a fact, but I think you're right.
I think it was. And so his legal name on that Tennessee driver's license is Nehemiah Ezekiel Wahl. And and if you're squirmish about it, I'll continue the story as far as what I know.
Please do.
So it appears that he lives in Tennessee and he is a member of some fringe religious group. And we're being led to believe that he is a butterfly breeder. That is his profession.
No, he is a butterfly farmer.
Is the butterfly farm in Alabama?
Wedding zoos and museums where children can go in and experience butterflies firsthand. And those things aren't actually bred at the places where you experience them at. They have to be purchased. And apparently on Wahl's family farm, Wahl has a butterfly breeding facility. I have no idea how many of the things he grows and how much he makes, but that's his profession.
Okay, well, let me boil it down for you as far as leadership goes. And you guys will remember the bad old days when I was standing there behind people like Joe Reed waiting to speak to my legislators when the school teacher union was in charge, right? So what's happened to education funding since we've had a supermajority in 2010? It's gone up exponentially. The school teachers union, what is that? It makes no difference who's in there. Everybody's interested in big government. No, everybody's forgotten what being a staunch conservative Republican means, because, like I said, we're all hooked on the crack of the Biden administration, and all that money's drying up fast.
In defense of the legislature, the Alabama's economy has grown. A lot of it's through inflation, but state revenues without really raising taxes have just exploded. I mean, Kay Ivey's overseen like the greatest economic expansion the state has ever experienced. And so the portion of the money that goes into the Education Trust Fund went to education.
Okay.
Well, and while I was there, I think that over the time period, education is our foundation, no matter if you're state, country, or whatever. If we don't educate our folks, our young people, we're not going to have a future. But it's just like what the community colleges have done. They're bringing back the trades, skilled trades in a big way. And I think that's what is attracting business to our state, helping to attract. But it also offers opportunities just over like our Gadsden State Community College. You've got guys that are going through these programs and they're coming out making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 a year just walking into a job. And even some, if you're willing to do more and travel, you can make a lot more, whether it's welding, plumbing, electrical.
Well, I will say that the business community has been very successful regardless of who's been in charge. Wouldn't you say that the business community has taken the lead? The idea that I'm sorry. Yeah, I remember when Kay was a Democrat running for the Public Service Commission.
Exactly.
Decades ago.
Okay, so let's get back to the controversy here. The committee received extensive documentation from both parties, but the facts in Alabama law were clear. John Wahl is fully qualified to run for lieutenant governor under the Alabama Constitution, Taylor said. Isbell disagreed. For the steering committee not to consider the challenge of residency of John Wahl is actually shameful and politically motivated. Now, that is your quote. I don't want to put any words in your mouth. Is that correct?
That's exactly right.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. And I don't know why we're playing so loosey-goosey with something as important as the lieutenant governor position.
Well, the bottom line of what it comes down to, you've got a 21-person steering committee that sits there and makes the decision for everyone. And I've talked to a lot of people in the party regarding this particular challenge, which was not accepted, and another challenge that was accepted. And it's politics at its finest. And there were actually two members on the board or on the steering committee that with another, and I'm not going to bring up the particular challenge, they said, we can do whatever we want to. It doesn't matter what's taking place.
So Whitney Scapacci is another podcaster. She did a podcast with us prior to this meeting, and she actually had an email that went around to the steering committee members telling them how they were going to vote.
Well,
were you
and
aware
who is
of
that? And who is that from? Was that revealed?
She would not reveal her source, but it came down to it
But
proved to
sent
be
the email?
100% accurate. It proved to be
Well,
100%.
Who is the original progenitor of the email is a question.
That's for her to say, but
Well, I mean, it's not her source. The email is to the 21 members from someone on the committee. So, I mean,
Well,
if we look at the email, we could find that out.
Well, the bottom line is that in this particular challenge, it was a 9-9 vote. So you had 9 people that stood up and wanted to see the challenge go through. And then the interim chair, which is Joan Reynolds, a good lady. She spent a lot of time with the Republican Party, but her association with John Wahl, of course, she's going to go with him. So she voted not to accept the challenge and deny it. Now, there was a person that was on that steering committee that voted that day that has business dealings with John Wahl in the private sector. They should have recused themselves. Also, get a lot of phone calls coming in, but also there was a young man that interned for John Wahl. With that association, I think that person should have recused himself, because if you're in the legislature, if you're on a municipality, county commission, city council, If something has to do with your dealings personally, you recuse yourself. And they're overlooking this on the steering committee. And actually, in the future, I plan to bring either 2, 3, or 4 resolutions that address those type of things, along with I've got a plethora of information that people have called me or I've already thought of. We need to make this transparent, accountable, and we need somebody that will direct our ship in the right direction, because I know politics play in everything. However, if you want to do the right thing, and they keep saying, well, how do we grow the Republican Party? Where do you go? Where do you go? Look at Nathaniel Ledbetter. He ran as a Democrat in 2010 and he's the Speaker of the House now, and he ran as a Republican in 2014. And there are several other people that were not challenged, but they've either voted for or went to fundraisers for Democrats within the last 6 years. They weren't challenged. And why weren't they? But there should be more definite rules in place for the bylaws. But with John Walls, it's a law. You have to live there for 7.
It's in the Constitution, isn't it, Gil?
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
This isn't something, you can't make a law that undoes the Constitution. You can amend the Constitution. I mean, I hate to give a constitutional lecture, but you know how this is.
Well, and I also hope
what we ignore and what we pay attention to in this state are hilarious.
Well, it goes on everywhere, but I tell you what, I hope to get, not this session, but next year, whoever I deem to hopefully work with, then basically it should be up to the Secretary of State office in the state of Tennessee. That's the Secretary of State deems if somebody's eligible or not. And if there's a question, you have to come prove that you are eligible to run. And even though the Republican Party has their steering committee, it's a state of Alabama question, but it's never going to be done unless somebody takes it to court.
Yes, sir.
And going to court is an expensive and long-term endeavor.
I can account for that. I can attest to that. So, Mr. Mosley, why don't you give us your 5 minutes on what's going on the other side of the globe? Apparently, we've attacked Iran.
I think for most people by now are aware that on Saturday morning, about 3 a.m. our time, U.S. forces in cooperation with our Israeli allies attacked Iran pretty heavily. I think over 400 fighter jets were in that first wave. On the next day, bombers, were involved. We've killed the Ayatollah, Ali Khamenei, and 40 of the top people in the Iranian government, the regime. And they have since fired off missiles at our air bases. They did strike one of our bases in Kuwait, killing 3 of our service members and wounding 5 others. Apparently we have complete air superiority because they have not shot down any of the hundreds of aircraft. We've already flown 1,000 sorties as of this morning. We did get 3 F-15 shot down, but they were shot down over Kuwait by Kuwaiti air defenses. We're trying to figure out what went wrong there.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was friendly fire, right?
Yeah, that was a friendly fire deal where, all of a sudden blips appeared on the screen. Obviously the F-15 is not a stealth aircraft, so he would show up on radar. And, once you launch a surface to air missile, he's going to get hit, unlike the F-35s, F-22s, and, the B-2 stealth bombers.
Okay, but for our listeners, there are rumors of sleeper cells and all these things that we hear about. The reason that we walk around with these personal surveillance devices so the government can know what we're doing all the time. the things that keep us safe. So,
Yeah, there was an attack. There was an individual from Senegal for whatever insane reason. We gave him citizenship, even though ever since he's been there from Senegal, he's been committing crimes, whether it's being a vendor in New York without a license to actual, felonious type thefts. But wearing a shirt saying property of Allah, he walked into, he originally fired rounds at people on a patio outside of a bar in Austin. And then when you can only get so many people that way, he walked out of the vehicle and continued firing. And fortunately, a law enforcement officers arrived within 1 minute and gunned him dead. There's 2 people last I saw killed, 17 wounded at least. That could have been really bad had the officers, not been there as quickly as they did. I mean, on a normal call, they're not there that fast. But
yeah,
fortunately, this time the police came in and saved the day.
I can tell you the 50 cals are up at the entrance to NAS Pensacola. And so I would imagine Maxwell and some other places.
Yeah, this would not be a good day to try to get an unauthorized entry into a military base anywhere in the world.
No, just remember these guys are busy. Stay out of their way. If you see something, say something. And, if you're strapped, act accordingly. So, Brandon, gas prices, the straits are closed. 3 of our tankers have been hit by a $500 drone with a grenade hanging off the bottom of it, or whatever the hell they're using to take out our poor helpless oil tankers. Any insight on that? I just went to Buc-ee's and filled up. It's $2.99 still. It's under $3. What do you foresee?
Now, obviously, we don't have the greatest trade relationship with Iran, so very little, if any, of our oil is Iranian in origin. Where you might run into some issues is if they successfully close the Strait of Hormuz, which means, United Arab Emirates and Kuwait and some of the Saudi ports would then be closed to oil exports. Obviously, our Navy and Air Force guys are over there trying to prevent that from happening, but that's a very narrow strait, and it's not too difficult if you can sink a ship right there in that strait to tie it up. So that's sort of, and then again, the Iranian, even just the shipments of Iranian oil, if they shut down, that may have an effect on the commodities market, because the countries that do buy oil from Iran, they're going to have to get their fuel from another source. So China and countries like that may end up hitting up some of the sources that we use. So, a lot of that on the commodities market is speculation.
So, one last issue that we can't ignore. There have been several arrests in Great Britain and resignations across the board, from the Metropolitan Museum of Art to Bear Stearns over these Epstein files. President Clinton,
apparently Larry Summers at Harvard was a big-time correspondent, shared all kinds of cool information with Mr. Epstein.
Yes, and it just makes you wonder who the Department of Justice is working for if they've had this stuff for a decade.
Well, I mean, it's not their job to release mine and yours correspondence, even if one of us later turns out to be a sleazebag.
Mm-hmm. Thank God for the civil justice system, or we'd have never known anything about any of this. Just remember that.
Well,
everybody hates lawyers until they need one.
That's
we
right.
probably need to cover the Republican chairman's race, which is coming up. Gil, you're on the executive committee, right?
I am on the state executive committee, and it's going to be an interesting race, to say the least. You have John Wahl, who has stepped down, he's running for lieutenant governor, and that was my challenge. But you have Scott Stothagen, who is a representative from the Hartsville area, and he was the leader of the caucus, but he stepped down from that position to run for the ALGOP chairperson. You have Joan Reynolds, who's the interim chair, who is running. Then most recently, you've had John Merrell, who was our prior Secretary of State, I think 2018 to 2022, and he has stepped into the race. Now, I think those are the only three. Is that correct, Brandon?
Stan Cook announced, but
Stan's already stepped back.
He's already withdrawn, right?
He has already withdrawn, and he is putting his support behind Scott Stothagen. And I think it's very interesting that how this is all, and it's politics at its finest. You know, you've got Joan, who is, part of the house of John Wahl, and Joan's a good person. She's a nice lady and done, as I said, a lot of things for the Republican Party in our state.
But
and
she is 83.
Pardon?
But she is 83 years old.
And that's not that I have an issue with somebody being 83, but it's time to let younger folks come in and let's let the party evolve, because if you stay the same, you're going to die. You have to evolve or you have to change. And with John Merrell, I think it's a political play by some folks in Montgomery, because a lot's going on in the House of Representatives right now on power plays. And I'll tell you what, Scott, I'm a supporter of his. I like John Wahl and I like Joan, but Scott, I think, would take the party in the right direction for the future.
All right, Brandon, your job is to get Scott on here.
But
we need to talk to Scott immediately, because I can tell you, John Merrill's sex scandal, fresh in my mind.
Well, and I think people have short-term memories, and like I said, I do like John. And John did a fabulous job as Secretary of State. But if other folks around the country look and see who's in position, I just don't think it would be best for the Republican Party in the state of Alabama.
All I'll say about John is when he was Secretary of State, he had two staff members, Hugh Evans, who was a long-term attorney from over at the Ethics Commission who knew nothing about ethics, and David Brewer, our former county administrator. It took us 20 years to dynamite his ass out of Baldwin County, and he hires him as his chief of staff up there in Montgomery. Anyway.
Well, it's exactly. I tell you what, politics goes on everywhere. You're going to work with your contacts, your friendships. I still keep in contact with many people in the legislature, not many of my local guys, because I want to know what's going on. And I'm talking to people in leadership, and we'll see what the future holds with not only the Republican Party, but also with the state. There are a lot of things, a lot of moving parts right now with, challenging John Wahl. He's going to be one of 4 or 5 candidates for lieutenant governor. Supposedly there's going to be a challenge from the Democrats and or Doug Jones against Tommy Tuberville as soon as he's elected as the primary candidate. That's just rumor and innuendo, but it most likely will happen.
And why would we set ourselves up for this? That's my question. I mean, the GOP leadership should vet everybody so that when we do get to that position, we're not sitting there defending the indefensible.
Well, again, it just all depends on what they saw or what they knew. And if Tommy came in, he knows the game in Washington now. So you bring a lot of that here. It will be interesting, because what does happen if he's challenged, and if it's not an expedient trial and he's elected governor, and then all of a sudden he's deemed that he shouldn't be in that position. And I don't know the law, and I don't know how things would fall out. This is strictly opinion and just talking. Who would step into that to the governorship? It's going to be whoever's lieutenant governor.
Right.
And I know people are thinking way out about trying to do this. And a lot of people say, don't talk about stuff like that. But the bottom line is the public needs to know, and what are the possibilities? Because can the Republican Party, that steering committee, choose someone to go on the ballot? But again, if it happens after the ballots are printed, I don't think you can by law.
I don't think you can either.
So it's a very interesting balance there of what's going on, and we'll just have to wait and see what does happen.
Well, if you're starved for information and you want to keep up with all this, check out the Alabama Gazette. Brandon Mosley writes 5 articles a day, or the AI does. I don't know who's doing the writing over there these days, but he stays on top of it pretty good. Well, listen, we certainly appreciate your time, and I know you're a busy man. Brandon, anything else that we need to know about the goings on in Montgomery before we sign off?
We'll be back for day 17 of the Alabama legislative session tomorrow.
Okay. Well, everybody, thank you for your time, and we will see you later.
Harry, Brandon, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It started out as a political statement.
She was there with a phallic costume on, holding an American flag and a sign that said, "No dictator."
It quickly became a legal matter for Renee Gamble, the woman wearing the phallic costume.
She says, am I being detained? And he doesn't respond. So she turns to walk away. He then grabs her from behind, pulls her down onto the ground.
Gamble was arrested and charged with disorderly conduct and resisting an arrest.
Turn over, on your belly.
Now, months later, 2 additional charges filed, giving officers a false name and breaking a city ordinance related to disturbing the peace.
What's your name?
Aunt Tifa.
Aunt Tifa, can you tell me where the zipper to this is?
We spoke with Gamble's attorney, who says he's prepared to defend his client in court.
The whole point of the costume and the sign was, making the political point about the threat of a dictator. Even people that disagree with her politics say that she had a right to do what she did.
No, I'm not trying to violate your freedom of speech. I'm trying to preserve a town that has values.
Gamble's attorney says this case centers on constitutionally protected political speech and believes his client is not at fault.
It's not so much her as the Constitution that's on trial. If it's offensive to one person, I don't know if that means it's sufficiently offensive to be offensive to the community.
And Gamble will soon get her day in court. The trial set for Wednesday, March 4th. In Fairhope, Taylor Boyson, WKRG News 5.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, I hope I may say comrades and friends, before your minds, I exempt myself from the Speaker's kind offer of protection that was so generously proffered at the opening of this evening. Anyone who wants to say anything abusive about or to me is quite free to do so, and welcome, in fact, at their own risk. It's not just the right of the person who speaks to be heard. It is the right of everyone in the audience to listen and to hear. And every time you silence somebody, you make yourself a prisoner of your own action because you deny yourself the right to hear something. In other words, your own right to hear and be exposed is as much involved in all these cases as is the right of the other to voice his or her view. Indeed, as John Stuart Mill said, if all in society were agreed on the truth and beauty and value of one proposition, all except one person, it would be most important, in fact, it would become even more important, that that one heretic be heard, because we would still benefit from his perhaps outrageous or appalling view. In more modern times, this has been put, I think, best by a personal heroine of mine, Rosa Luxemburg, who said that the freedom of speech is meaningless unless it means the freedom of the person who thinks differently. My great friend John O'Sullivan, former editor of the National Review, and I think probably my most conservative and reactionary Catholic friend, once said, it's a tiny thought experiment, he says, if you hear the Pope saying he believes in God, you think, well, the Pope's doing his job again today. If you hear the Pope saying he's really begun to doubt the existence of God, you begin to think he might be onto something. Well, if everybody in North America is forced to attend at school training in sensitivity on Holocaust awareness and is taught to study the final solution, about which nothing was actually done by this country or North America or the United Kingdom while it was going on. But let's say, as if in compensation for that, everyone's made to swallow an official and unalterable story of it now, and it's taught as the great moral exemplar, the moral equivalent of the morally lacking elements of the Second World War, the way of stilling our uneasy conscience about that combat. If that's the case with everybody, as it more or less is, and one person gets up and says, you know what, this Holocaust, I'm not sure it even happened. In fact, I'm pretty certain it didn't. Indeed, I begin to wonder if the only thing is that the Jews brought a little bit of violence on themselves. That person doesn't just have a right to speak. That person's right to speak must be given extra protection, because what he has to say must have taken him some effort to come up with, might contain a grain of historical truth, might in any case give people to think about why do they know what they already think they know. How do I know that I know this, except that I've always been taught this and never heard anything else? It's always worth establishing first principles. It's always worth saying, what would you do if you met a Flat Earth Society member? Come to think of it, how can I prove the Earth is round? Am I sure about the theory of evolution? I know it's supposed to be true. Here's someone who says there's no such thing, it's all intelligent design. How sure am I of my own views? Don't take refuge in the false security of consensus and the feeling that whatever you think, you're bound to be okay because you're in the safely moral majority. My own opinion is enough for me, and I claim the right to have it defended against any consensus, any majority, anywhere, any place, any time. And anyone who disagrees with this can pick a number, get online, and kiss my ass.